I got the opportunity to travel to Costa Rica by myself in college for 3 weeks. And I was really excited, and I got my little like Lonely Planet Costa Rica, and I was like planning out my itinerary, and the place that I wanted to go to the most in Costa Rica was Corcovado National Park. And I think the quote from National Geographic was the most biologically intense place on Earth, like in terms of biodiversity. So I was super excited. It's way in the south part of Costa Rica on this little peninsula. It's kind of hard to get to. So I had to take like a bunch of different buses, and then there's the closest you can get is this like town nearby, and then you have to like take a taxi into the like trailhead and so forth. So that was what I was gonna do, and stayed in a hotel, and I left a bunch of my stuff with the guy at the desk who said he'd keep it under the front desk for me, and then I was like, well, I have to stay really close to wherever I can catch a taxi, so I should just walk down this dirt road going out of the town, which I think is in the right direction, and there's a sign for a hotel, so I'm like, okay, and I keep walking, and I'm walking down this dirt road, and the sun is starting to go down, and I can't find it, and I'm starting to get nervous, and then this guy comes up to me on a dirt bike, and is like, hey, you look lost. I'm like, yeah, kind of maybe lost. And he says, I work at this hotel, I could take you there if you want. So I climb on the back of his dirt bike. And that's the only time I've ridden on anything resembling a motorcycle, and fortunately he was telling the truth. And the people at the hotel told me to get a taxi to the trailhead. I had to go way back to where I had turned off the main road anyway. So I woke up really early, walked back there, and I think it was like 6 a.m. This guy pulls up in a really old Jeep and says Los Patos, which was the name of the ranger station that was the trailhead I was going to, and I was like, yeah. So I got in, and we go down another dirt road, and eventually it leads to a river, and then we're driving through the river like it's a road, and I look down at the gear shift of the Jeep, and there's smoke coming out of it. I'm like, that's not supposed to happen, right? So I was like, okay, now I'm gonna die. This is when I'm gonna die. But somehow it managed to keep going through the river, and then we got back on the land, and then we were at the ranger station. And the rangers there were like, you're going to hike through the jungle by yourself? And I already had this whole debate, because it said in the guidebook that, yeah, it's a good idea to hire a guide to go through this rainforest, because the paths are not marked very well, which I found out as I was hiking. There's a couple of river crossings, one of which you have to avoid at high tide because there can be sharks and alligators coming through the river. There are peccaries, which are like these wild boar sort of like animals that sometimes attack people. So, you know, but I was like, it didn't say that I absolutely need to hire a guide. And I was, super, I was like backpacking, and I'm super cheap and I'm very stubborn, and I was like, whatever, I'll be fine. And the rangers were like, okay, well, we're gonna have you go with these jacked Australian guys who are waiting to start on the trail, and you should be their buddy. And I'm like, fine, whatever. And I'm not very fast at hiking, and it's really humid, so they tried to wait for me a couple of times, and then they just took off, and, by myself. But this really nice Swedish couple caught up to me, although one time after a river crossing I turned around and they were just naked in the river. It's like, I'm gonna keep going. So I managed to make it. There's another ranger station in the middle of the park where you can like camp for a couple of days. So I like barely made it there before sundown, and that was great. And it was a really cool place to stay, and there were lots of animals, and I got to see a tapir, although I think... So I made friends with this guy who was one of those hired guides that I'd been told to hire, and I think he was feeding the tapir bananas because I saw him do it, and that was why the tapir was coming to our station. But I could see the benefit of hiring someone like that, because he'd just like reach into a bush and have a frog or like a snake or something, and But the last day before I was going to leave, so I had made a reservation online to stay here at this station, but you couldn't pay online at the time. So I brought traveler's checks with me because I was like, I'm not going to carry a ton of cash through the rainforest. But apparently traveler's checks are not a thing anymore. This was in 2008, but even back then it was not. So the ranger guy was like, I can't accept these. And I was like, that's unfortunate because that's all I have with me. And my hired guide buddy was in his office for whatever reason, and they had this rapid argument in Spanish. And I guess my friend said that he would, because he's always going in and out, hiking in and out of the rainforest because that's his job. So he was like, I'll take them to the bank and exchange them for money and bring them back to you. And the ranger was like, okay, but it's on you if something goes wrong. And I was like super relieved. And I don't know if I even got to say thank you because I just left as soon as possible. Because first of all, I wanted to get out of the rainforest in time. And also I was like, I don't want anything else to go wrong before I try to leave. And so I was hiking out to a different station called La Leona, and there's a taxi, which is really someone's pickup truck with like a cover over it, that goes between there and the town, but I missed the last one. I got lost because the trail was not very well marked, and I got there too late. So I had to, there are a couple of like rainforest lodge type places out there that people stay at. So I was sort of wandering around being like, I guess I have to knock on one of these people's doors and like ask if I can stay there. And this gay couple from Toronto pulls up in a Jeep next to me, and they're like, hey, you look kind of lost, do you need help? And I'm like, yeah, I missed the taxi, I needed somewhere to stay. And they're like, oh, you should stay where we're staying. So they drive me to where they're staying, and the guy there does not want to take credit cards because he's like, oh, I have to like make a phone call and it's a whole like complicated thing. And he's like, you know what? My cleaning lady had a day off today and I haven't done any cleaning because I don't feel like it. If you will agree to stay in one of the rooms that's not cleaned, you can stay here for free. Which was nice because it's one of those places where they like cook all your meals and stuff because it's out in the middle of the rainforest. So I kind of like got ridiculously lucky. And yeah, so when I got back to that hotel where I left all my stuff, my iPod was gone because I was dumb and I left it there. Because I thought, he's like, oh, I'll keep it under the front desk. And it was in the cleaning closet when he went to go get it. So. And then I found out, I had sent my mother an email before I went into the rainforest being like, hey, I'm going to be out of touch for a couple of days, going through the rainforest. And somehow that email didn't go through. So she hadn't heard from me for days, and once I got back in touch with her, she was like hysterical, and apparently she had gotten my neighbor, who was a Spanish teacher, to call up the park and like ask where I was. And,
oh my God.
But yeah, it all turned out okay, but there was a lot of, traveling by yourself can present a lot of challenges, but it was a great experience.